It's an honor to be here with you, friends, and I'm very pleased to give the invocation to start us off, so please let us pray. Almighty God, we are very glad to be here today, and we thank you for that. Thank you for steering us through the very strange waters that we had to navigate to get here. And that's something that, when the wind kicks up and the sea is storm-tossed, as it has been in the past few months, Scripture invites us to look and see you, undaunted above the waters. Between April, when we first thought we would hold this gala, and now, events have intervened which seem to us outlandishly unusual, things we'd never seen or experienced. But you are not taken by surprise. You are no stranger to disease or persecution or abuses of power. You have suffered much more of them yourself than we have. And indeed, when we were afraid this year and confused, you were still with us. Coronavirus and its lockdowns didn't change your plans, which are and were and will be to love us and abide with us, to strengthen our resolve and see us safely home at the last. Thank you for that. Today is a good day to look to you and find you in a few things which stand steady and permanent against all worldly change and uncertainty. Some of those things are the high purposes to which this institute and this nation are dedicated, the spirit of fellowship and dedication which those purposes inspire in this community of friends, and the liberty and justice which, as the prophet says, are ours to seek and yours to pour down upon us like rolling waters. We are honoring a man, Larry Arnn, who has pointed many of us on our way toward those high and noble pursuits in defense of this great nation. It is not only Dr. Arnn's students who have him to thank for enlightening their minds and counseling their hearts, though that would certainly be more than enough. It is the many people, flung far and wide, who have benefited directly or indirectly from his writing and teaching. Only you, God, know the full extent and impact one man's good work can have. But we know this, that wherever there is wisdom and generosity and good sense, these things come from you. Thank you for all you have done to bless Dr. Arnn and to bless others through him. We pray that you would continue to bless him ever more abundantly. We pray also for our president, Ryan Williams, and the Claremont staff of which he is the leader. Thank you for Ryan's gracious guidance and the fellowship he has fostered among all who work under his direction. We ask that your Spirit would be at work in this organization, guiding and directing us each in our many tasks. We pray for the gift of friendship among ourselves, and we ask that this institute would be an instrument of your truth, a gift to America. For America herself, we pray as urgently as we know how. She is a nation founded to the glory of your name, and we who love her cannot help but see your providential hand at work in the direction of this mighty and noble endeavor, this grand adventure and this gift of freedom to the world. The hour is very late for us. We are beset by insurrectionary riots and anti-human teachings from within our own borders, which threaten to unmake us. But whatever the outcome of the coming months and years, we know that in the last analysis it is true what Elisha said. Fear not, for they that are with us are more than they that stand against us. In your long salvation history, Lord, we humbly ask to play a part, not knowing what tomorrow holds, but sure that if we stand with courage, then all the company of heaven stands too at the ready to fight with swords of flame for the triumph of your people and your truth. Bless this meal. Bless these people gathered here. Bless this country and her president. Amen.
I promised my wife tonight I would not say, come on, man. And she said, make sure you don't say, here's the deal. So I won't, but I might say 1, 2, 3, as our candidate has done. It's a great honor to be here tonight. We owe a debt of gratitude to the Claremont Institute and its president, Ryan Williams. You know, in 2016, we were faced, some of us thought, with an unpalatable choice because the message was conservative and traditionalist, but many of us thought the messenger was uncouth and therefore nullified the messenger. But very few institutions on the conservative side had a broader vision. In other words, they thought this is not about an op-ed writer, this is not about a career, this is not about a think tank. It's about millions of people in the interior of this country that have lost hope. It's about millions of people who want to be identified by the content of their character and to whom the race they want to be incidental rather than essential to their personas. It was about whether the United States abroad was going to encourage democracy and encourage freedom, but not interfere in the lives of other people to demand it, often at the cost of blood and treasure for those who were the least able to afford it in the United States. And so there were very few institutions saw that. One was the Claremont Institute. Another was Hillsdale College. Another was the Bradley Foundation. But I must confess, most of the institutions that I am connected with, the Hoover Institution, the National Review magazine, couldn't distinguish what was at stake. And they made a fundamental mistake, I think. It's hard to collectively damn anybody, but I think they made a fundamental mistake as seeing themselves as the arbiter of what the people needed, and they suffered accordingly the consequences. Claremont did not do that, and I think their reputation reflects the thanks of the nation for that decision. I've known Larry Arndt for over 20 years, and most of us understand the contribution he did at Hillsdale in this 2-decade period. He inherited a renowned institution, but one racked by controversy and dissension. Most of us think, well, Larry expanded the endowment, and he did. And he took a modest campus and made it absolutely stunning. It reminded me what Suetonius said, that Augustus claimed, that he came into Rome and found a city of brick, and he left it a city of marble. And I always think of that. When I went to Hillsdale, it was mostly brick, and now it seems to be marble. So that was a stunning achievement. He encouraged research, and he brought in top-flight faculty. And we know Hillsdale because of the platforms, and many platforms that have expanded, not just online classes, but video series, and expanded imprimis, retreats, etc. The message then expanded beyond the confines of the campus. But what was at the heart of Larry's success, and thereby the college's renaissance, was that in times of questions and controversies and rancor, people could always look toward Hillsdale and their president, Larry Arnn, for a voice of sobriety and say, no, we're not going to follow the mob. No, this is a fad. No, this is hysteria. No, this is contrary to the founder's vision of a constitutional republic. No, not in our 3rd century are we going to become a radical mobocracy. And you think, well, that was an obvious call, but when you look at university presidents, when you look at national magazines that were conservative, if you look at think tanks, that was not often the case. We didn't find guidance. And so people came to be accustomed that they could look to Hillsdale and find that sober and judicious reliance. Not long ago, Rush Limbaugh asked me a question. He said, what is it about Hillsdale that why do we all trust it? And I said, because it's predictably wise. And it doesn't give in to the furor of the moment. That seems so rare these days. So we all, I think, as well as owing Larry a debt of gratitude and Claremont, we owe their vision and their consistency and their independence. We're faced with a big decision in just 10 days. And everybody says, well, isn't this the biggest election of our lives? We always say that. But what's different this time is that we're faced with opponents that do not want to change the presidency, but they want to change the rules by which we elect the president and we govern ourselves. We haven't seen that in our lifetime. So it's not just a question of two alternative visions, but it's a question that maybe after 233 years we're going to, in our infinite folly, discard the Electoral College without any discussion why it's there in the first place. After 150 years, we're going to discard the idea of a nine-justice Supreme Court without any knowledge of the turmoil that was there before we codified 9 justices. After 170 years, we're going to get rid of the Senate filibuster. After 60 years, we're going to get rid of the idea of a 50-state union and add 2 states and with it 4 senators to the country. And we're going to do all that in our ignorance for the short-term advantage of a political party that has not been successful in advancing an agenda through referenda, state legislatures, and the U.S. Congress, but has relied on the courts and the popular culture to push through ideas that otherwise do not resonate with the people. What's also different is that we used to look toward elected officials as custodians of the law. And by that I mean when there was turmoil in the streets, you knew that there was somebody in charge that would restore order and security, so the shop owner, the homeowner, the mother walking her children in the park would be protected. In democratic cities of our youth, we can remember these customers. They were not always likable people. Sam Yorty here in Los Angeles, Frank Rizzo in Philadelphia, and often crude characters, Mayor Daley of Chicago. But they, at least in the democratic tradition, believed in the security of their citizens. What we're seeing now, for the first time in my life, we have blue state mayors and blue state governors and local district attorneys and city councils that are actively either neglecting the violence or encouraging it on the agenda of an election in 2020, that chaos and turmoil will create a sense of unrest that will be advantageous to their own political party. We have not seen areas in the United States in the past that deliberately nullified the federal law in the fashion that we did in the 1860s. We have 550 sanctuary cities in our jurisdiction in the United States whose premise is we are going to nullify federal law because we are morally superior to the people who made it, and no other people will ever do what we do. No city in Utah will nullify federal gun legislation they don't like. No city in Wyoming will say the Endangered Species Act does not involve us. Only we, the morally superior betters of the country, will do that. That's up at stake. And finally, how we vote is up at stake. If you don't get the desired result, then you can change the system, as I suggested, or you can change the electorate. So we're now actively discussing people 16 and 17 being eligible to vote, ex-felons being eligible to vote, people who are not citizens of the United States eventually should be able to vote. So we're changing what is the founding principles of citizenship, and we're doing it in 2 different diametrically opposed ways. We're having pre-citizenship return, where we're going to be tribal and identified by people who share superficial appearances, and they owe their first loyalty to their tribe rather than the common idea of being American. We're innervating the middle class. We're making a pyramidal society no more frequent than here in California. The locus classicus of this new medievalism of two classes rather than three, and we're creating a nation of peasants in a sense. We're also, I think, besides being tribes and peasants, we're also saying that we're going to be mere residents, that citizenship doesn't matter. And the pillars of citizenship have disappeared to the point where all I can see that advantages the citizen over the resident, whether legal or illegal, is the fact that you get a passport and you travel more officially across borders, and for most of the time you can vote and hold office. Otherwise, it has no advantages left. On the postmodern side, we have an entire group of elites who feel they're globalist, and their first allegiance is to the international order, which they see as superior to their own constitutional republic. In areas from abortion to climate change, they feel that the European model or the westernized model in Asia is far superior of the archaic and ossified visions of the 18th century. In addition to that, we have these evolutionaries. I mentioned these changes into the system involving the court or the electoral college. But they're talking about things, should they get power, way and well beyond that. Why do we have 2 senators per state? Why do we in California have 20 million people electing each of our 2 senators, but people in Wyoming get 1 senator per 250,000? Why? The answer is obvious in the Constitution, in the Federalist Papers. But if you don't know the Constitution, you don't have the Federalist Papers, and you believe in a radical equality result, you want to change that system. And they have a whole agenda that I think will follow from their initial success should they carry the Congress and the presidency. And finally, this election is about something that we use this word administrative state, deep state, but we have an entire array of elite bureaucrats and federal officials who feel that presidencies and Congresses are transitory phenomenon, and only they know the system, and only they know the rules, and only they are the guardians of America. And we see them now in the CIA, we see them in the FBI, we see them in the IRS, we see them in the DOJ, and we see them in God of all places, the retired military. And they all feel that in this particular time, their moral superiority allows them to break the law, to create or maintain an America according to their vision rather than ours. And so what I would suggest is this is the most important election of our time, because people dissatisfied with prior results and processes want to change the way that we run America and change it in a way that our founders never intended. And I'll try to be a little bit more upbeat in our closing remarks, but with that, I'll finish. Thank you very much.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this wonderful evening here outside in what has to be one of the oddest years in recent memory. That was quite an invocation from young Dr. Spencer Klavan, wasn't it? I would say I didn't pay him to say that, but that would be a lie. It's really gratifying to be here with you all tonight. It's going to be wonderful to do it again tomorrow night in Newport Beach. We've done what we can to adapt ourselves to these odd circumstances, and we're very grateful to all of you for helping make all of this possible. It says in our program that our chairman, Thomas Klingenstein, was going to join us and speak tonight. Tom had to beg off. He sends his regrets. He's in the middle of a one-man-on-a-mission campaign to do everything he can to make sure this election goes the right way as he sees it. Many of you have seen it, but if you if you pull up YouTube and search Thomas Klingenstein, you'll get a video that's gotten about 1.5 million views. I think it's called A Man Versus a Movement. It's really excellent. It's a little more partisan than I can be here from this podium running a C3, but I encourage you all to check it out if you have not. We couldn't do all this, of course, without our supporters. We don't really sell anything at the Claremont Institute except a few magazines. So we rely on the good graces of all of you to make all of this possible. So I just wanted to recognize some folks here tonight. We have many host committee members present who help make our events all year possible, including this keynote event and gala. Please hold your applause till the end. That's Michael Burstein, Roy Crummer, Robert and Wendy DePietro, Mark and Susan Carlson, Larry Matson and Ellen Sherwood, and Livia Solti Bowman. Thank you all very much. We'd like to thank also one of our event sponsors, the David Horowitz Freedom Center, represented here tonight by Michael Finch, an old friend of Claremont and of Larry's. And thank you, Michael, for joining us tonight, and thanks to the Horowitz Freedom Center. Some board members here tonight, Brian Kennedy, Roy Crummer, and Larry Matson, and then a very distinguished former board member, Pat Sajak, who's doing wonderful things at Hillsdale these days. So thank you all very much. Now, as you all know, we run a series of summer fellowships, and this year it was challenging, but I'm happy to report that we held all three of them, our residential fellowships, as I call them, because people come in for 3 weeks in the case of the Publius Fellowship, or a week each for Lincoln and John Marshall. And then we had the fourth year of our Speechwriters Fellowship, which we held in Maryland for 2.5 days. And we held all these in person when many of our think tank colleagues and competitors did nothing but Zoom this year. So we're wonderfully grateful to have been able to do that. And we have 2 fellowship sponsors here tonight who help sponsor our fellows every summer, and that's Michael Burstein and Gary and Lisa Lehner. So thank you all very much. And then finally, we have a few fellowship alumni in attendance. James Braid, who works at OMB, John Clark Levin, who's finishing his PhD about AI and policy making. Ask him about it. He'll be very eager to tell you all about it. And Larry Greenfield, who many of you know, an old friend of Claremont, a former employee of ours, and a fixture here in West Los Angeles. So thank you all. So this is a pretty intimate group here. Many of you know us very well. So I'm not going to drone on too long about our work. But I did want to just fill you in on what has been so far a banner year for us. The influence of the Claremont Review books and the American mind continues to grow. They've really never been greater. These summer fellowships we were very happy to have in person despite the difficulties. Our 800-strong alumni network continue to have a direct impact on policy in our nation's capital and around the country. 2 of our fellowship alumni, in fact, recently, in the last year or so, were appointed as judges in the federal appellate courts. Judge Stephen Menashe on the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, and Lawrence Van Dyke on our very own Ninth Circuit here in the West. As you know, the Ninth Circuit needs all the help it can get. While I'm on the topic of fellowships, I just wanted to recognize, besides our supporters, this year was challenging, to say the least, with many of our events and our fellowships. And we really couldn't do it at all without our wonderful staff, especially our events manager, Kirsten Gadiel, our VP of Development, Christine Dominich, and the many support staff that help make all this possible. So I'm very grateful to you all. Thank you very, very much. We would have staff meetings, in the spring planning the fellowships, and then really all year it seems planning this as we pushed it from April to the summer to October. And we decided the unofficial motto of the Claremont Institute's events team this year was, this is a family gathering, so expletive it will make it work. I mentioned the courts. John Eastman, of course, many of you know John. He's doing a visiting professorship in Colorado, University of Colorado Boulder this year. But his side job, if you can believe it, is working for as the founding director of our Center for Constitutional Jurisprudence. He continues to advance the principles of the founding on crucial issues like religious liberties, separation of powers, and very importantly, as we've all learned, especially poignantly and pointedly by this COVID business, a restraint of the bureaucracy. And then finally, I wanted to mention we're expanding our work in Washington, D.C. With a new center called the Center for the American Way of Life. The final details of that we're going to firm up at a board meeting next week. Its goal or its work will be to confront, both at the level of ideas and policy, the central threats to the American way of life. We think those are, among other things, identity politics, the rise of cosmopolitanism and globalism, and the denigration of citizenship and sovereignty, as Victor Davis Hanson rightly brought up, and then whatever newest fad of weaponized ideology the left decides to throw up, like the New York Times' recent 1619 project, for example. And then we're going to take direct aim at the assets of the modern left, including the universities, not Hillsdale, of course, it doesn't need our help in the least, our corrupt media, a corporate culture infected by and obsessed with racial grievance and hierarchy, and big tech monopolies that threaten to stifle or cut off the lifeblood of any republic. That's the freedom of thought and freedom of speech. The center's work is really just the proactive application of what we've always done at Claremont, founding principles, but with a new sense of urgency and aggressiveness driven by our righteous indignation at what we've witnessed in our country in recent decades, and to say nothing of the last few months, and an alarm at an increasingly radical and anti-American left and Democratic Party. I just want to offer one example of the center's work, or one of the ways in which the center can help continue the good work we've already been doing. We want to, among other things, accelerate and weaponize, in the best sense of that term, the work already being done by our fellows out and about in the country. Just in the last 3 months, one of our Lincoln Fellows from recent years, Christopher Ruffo, played a crucial role as an investigative source and reporter for the alarming rise of racialized, quote-unquote, sensitivity training in many of our state and local government agencies, as well as our federal administrative agencies, like the Federal Reserve Board, the Office of the Comptroller, the Treasury Department. These trainings, I'm sure many of you read about them, taught employees to check their privilege, confess their racist sins, merely because of the color of their skin, rather than what they had done or said. Chris ended up on Tucker Carlson to talk about this reporting, and he used that platform to call upon the administration and Donald Trump to end this abusive and arbitrary activity. Within weeks, of course, the president issued an executive order that prohibited any further critical race theory-inspired trainings. That's the academic term for all this madness, critical race theory. It's effective because the left has lamented what they call the chilling effect this order has had almost immediately on a lot of their activity across a large part of the private sector that comes into contact with the federal government through contracting. So to all patriotic Americans, of course, this chilling effect is wonderful news. We're proud of all this work. We're excited about the potential for expanding our work in Washington, but we're mindful of the hard intellectual work that goes into understanding the roots of our current crisis and our modern national pathologies. And this brings me to my introduction of our honoree tonight, Larry P. Arnn. As many of you know, our success today at the Claremont Institute is in large part a legacy of Larry's foresight and determination in leading Claremont from 1985 to 2000. He's continued to serve as our vice chairman. Many of you may not know that Larry was also one of a core group of graduate students at Claremont Graduate School who in 1979 founded the Claremont Institute. They had pursued academic careers because they loved teaching and thought it essential to free government. But they also came to the conclusion that our national political life, especially on the right, was in desperate need of intellectual and political guidance in a time of great confusion. They took inspiration from a great teacher and scholar of America and Abraham Lincoln, Harry V. Jaffa. This group of friends that founded the Claremont Institute thought that the American way of life, rooted in a proper understanding of America's founding principles, needed a more spirited public defense and needed to be taught to America's current and future leaders, as well as the citizenry at large. I mentioned Larry's tenure at the Claremont Institute ended in 2000. That was when he left Claremont to accept his current role as Hillsdale College's 12th president. Incidentally, that's when I left for Hillsdale too, from not too far down the 5 freeway in Encinitas, California, as an overconfident and very ignorant 18-year-old. Hillsdale and Larry made quick work of that in my first semester. Maybe it took 2 semesters. I don't know. Couldn't give up too easily, of course. Larry and Chris Flannery and Tom Silver and Peter Schramm and others founded the Claremont Institute out of a deep love of America, a sense of camaraderie and friendship grounded in their common pursuit of truth and beauty, and resting in their public-spirited faith in the sovereignty of the American people. Larry carried that spirit to Hillsdale, an institution much, much older than Claremont, but animated by a similar commitment to American republicanism and all its greatness and goodness. I don't need to list for all of you the successes that Hillsdale has had, and it's thriving under Larry's leadership. It's become one of the most influential institutions in America, thank God, and in American conservatism. It stands as a beacon of intelligent patriotism and liberal education in the proper sense of that term. In a larger world of higher education, too often infected by intellectual and political doctrines dedicated to ugliness, nihilism, and American dissolution, rather than beauty, truth, and American goodness. Larry has rebuilt nearly the entire campus since we both arrived there 20 years ago, including a magnificent chapel. Really, it's more appropriate to call it a small cathedral, the likes of which is seldom seen in modern America. You can see his commitment to truth and beauty in that building, among other things. They've opened a graduate school in Hillsdale, as well as a thriving Washington, D.C. center with another graduate program dedicated to improving the learning and character of our nation's public servants. Larry is a much sought-after unofficial advisor to many of the nation's most influential statesmen. He's a teacher and mentor of so many of the most impressive, intelligent, and public-spirited men and women working in Washington and across America. When he was in California, he was one of the architects of Proposition 209, passed in 1996, which prohibited the consideration of race in state government hiring, higher education, and government contracting. As many of you, most of you know, the left in California is trying to repeal that on November 3rd because it stands in the way of their radicalized and racialized divide and conquer strategy for the citizens of this state and the nation at large. Larry was against critical race theory long before it was cool. So if this great country of ours is to survive, to recover and sustain her greatness, and such a salutary turn is certainly not a foregone conclusion. We all have to dedicate ourselves to making sure it remains possible. The conditions of that salvation will really have laid in large part, or in great measure, or not laid, but made possible by the years of tireless work of our honoree tonight. He's a teacher and mentor of mine and countless others. He's a great American and the 2020 Claremont Institute Statesmanship Award recipient, Dr. Larry P. Arnn.
Wow. That's beautiful. Thank you, Brian. I'll have something to say about him in a minute. You're all wondering why I'm limping. I'll have something to say about that in a minute. But I want to begin with the fact that I've heard the voice of God twice tonight. First of all, that announcer guy, who's not even here. I'm afraid I'm too mischievous to use that guy because I would get it played when I wasn't even in the room. Anyway, that's impressive. And then that prayer, wasn't that prayer awesome? But I was surprised at one point because a Klavan, Spencer Klavan is his name. Where's that guy? Yeah, table 9. Stand up, boy. Anyway, he was talking about all this as strange and odd, right? It isn't. It's wicked. And he said, we don't understand it, but you, God, and I was sure he was going to say, have met Lucifer. And so you're bound to be able to understand it. No, he said something different than that, but I would have liked it if he had. So Victor Hansen congratulates us at Hillsdale on our wisdom, and he knows from his own education that you get that from your friends, if you're lucky enough to have the very best friends. Whatever we have, any of us here, we have it considerably from Victor Hansen. One gets honors when he gets old. Also, one breaks one's ankle when he gets old. And there's nothing honorable about limping, but honorable people strive to find something honorable about limping. And my limping has two honorable things about it. One is it may be, according to the orthopedist, connected to a football injury I had when I was in high school, which means it's kind of like a war wound. But better yet, 3 people, 2 of them faculty members, and another one, my good friend I'll name in a minute, have come up to me since I've been limping around the campus and said, still kicking butt, Dr. Arnn. Now that's the reputation you want to have with the faculty. I salute the old guys here whom I worked with. That was a heck of a thing. Brian Kennedy, my successor, is here. Glenn Elmers, my able member of the staff. I've been working with him some lately, and I'm pleased to say he's still incredibly easy to ridicule and also very able. And then, yeah. Pat Sajak, friend of mine now for got to be 30 years, more than that probably. And I'm proud to see him tonight and proud to see all of you. Mike Finch, is Mike Finch here somewhere? Somebody said he saw him, but he skipped out. Those are war days. When we started the Claremont Institute, we were just kids. Janet Pierce was the first office assistant. And we didn't know how to deal with her or anything about how to run an office. We were a bunch of useless PhDs and near PhDs, like answering the phone. We didn't know how to do that in some kind of professional way. She did. And it was all stupid, but in one way that I'll name not stupid. It was fun, though, because it was so stupid. And we would run out of money. And I'm a bit younger than the others who were involved in the beginning, and I may have become the president because I had enough sense to know that might be a bad thing if we let it happen. The rest of them, Peter and Chris and Tom. Well, Tom was kind of reasonable. Peter was Hungarian and full of beans, a big man, big heart, big spirit. If you played poker with him, you could always win a lot of money because he's a Hungarian, right? And what are they like? And so somebody would bluff him and he would lose. And then darned if he wouldn't announce that he's never going out again. Well, people who could play would just have a field day with that. Thank God none of us had any money. Now, Ryan I have not known since the old days. I've known him since his young days. I had him in class. He came to Hillsdale, as he said, the same year I did. I heard about him pretty quick. Mickey Craig, our old friend, was in the politics department then. That department's a lot bigger now, and it's full of all of our old friends. I was once denounced by somebody, supposedly a competing college, for hiring the heart of their politics faculty away. And I said, yeah, I did do that. And they said, it's just because you have a lot of money. And I said, well, I didn't have to pay them that much, but I would have if I needed to. Why did they come? And I said, well, they're friends of mine a long time before they knew you. Well, Mickey Craig is the original one there at Hillsdale, and he told me that this Ryan kid was very smart and also liked to drink beer. And I don't know, you drinking beer tonight, Ryan? He's not. And I had Ryan in class, and the standards are better at Hillsdale now than they were back then. They were good then. And that matters so very much in a college because if the kids are dumb, it's a little bit demoralizing, for the old people. And so when I met a really smart one, I thought, good, maybe we can do something with this. And Ryan's one of the first students who made me think that. So I am grateful to him. And now look at what he does here. The Claremont Institute is, I only know one bad thing about it. I gave this award to Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher and Clarence Thomas, and he's given it to me. Slim pickings these days. But no, he and Tom Klingenstein, you have to mention him. He couldn't be bothered to be here tonight. Tell him I said that. They've made it a going concern, and that's so important, right? Because there's got to be some reason why a bunch of people met. I arrived in Claremont in 1974. Tom and Peter and Chris had been here for 4 or 5 years before that. Why do we still do this? What is it about it? Well, we'll talk about that for a minute. The purposes of the Institute, we like to say, because we're human, and human is not divine. We're limited. We only know what we see. So we're very fond of saying around here that the principles were taught in the classes of Harry Jaffa, and they were. And he was a very great man. To know him is to change your life, except, by the way, for the very many students who didn't listen to him. I learned after I became a teacher on a regular basis when I went to Hillsdale that learning is actually in the student. And what they want and love and do and can do is crucial. And that's why I thought we better get a bunch of kids who really want to be here. But that's a vindication of free government if you think about it. But it extends even further because, Harry Jaffa didn't invent anything. He just found some stuff. Same thing can be said about Abraham Lincoln, to go one step back from him. And you're going up the peak when you start walking that way. The same thing can be said about Aristotle. If it's true that there are laws of nature and nature's God, then they represent a beauty and they call to us. And they always will, even if we stifle their voice. Something would have to explain the movement across this continent to make our nation. It's the most unique story in modern political history. Maybe it matches the greatest in the classical world because just think, it's 3 million people along a coast, and they formed an army. They'd never fought anybody. Some Indians with the British, right? And they called it the Continental Army, and they didn't know how big the continent was. They were driven by this notion, and it called to them. And the notion was not about their own greatness in the first sense. The notion was about love. What service can I do to that great love? And thereby deserve and win my honor, although it wouldn't be honorable to think that that honor was first. So we learned all that. And then we just decided, because we were crazy already, that we were going to give our lives to that. We all made resolutions. Peter and Chris thought they were going to be college professors, and they were. Chris still is. Tom Silver and I were determined never we would be. And the reason is college is no good these days. It's only a rare circumstance that brought me away from here. I would not have gone for any other reason. And you know, by the way, if you want to be a college president, you can be. Everybody here. There's 1,000 jobs a year. And most colleges are failing, right? So if you know anything about the world, you don't want that job. It's the dumbest job in the world. And then by chance, you know, and they were calling me. I stood out among the many hundreds who applied for the job because I was the one who wouldn't talk to them, didn't want it. And then they sent me the founding document of Hillsdale College, which is the governing instrument to this day and the only one. Nothing happens there except what that says. And it turned out it was written by people who became friends of Abraham Lincoln. Wrote the platform in a building that stands at Hillsdale College that he was elected president on. If you met Frederick Douglass, he gave you a visiting card. It has his picture on it. And the picture was taken in that same building. And you know, I'm a sucker for that stuff. And because the Claremont Institute was and is so strong, I thought I could leave it. So I did. And I was right, because look at it today. Isn't it awesome? And you know, now it's my boy doing it. I told Chairman Tom Kleinstein, one time I said, you should just make Brian the president. He said, he's too young. I said, yeah, he is. And he said, well, then why should I do it? And I said, well, you love him, and you won't mess with him. And he said, you love him too. I said, I do. I won't mess with him either. You see? And now it's come together, see? It's just awesome. And it stands for the truths that are written in the laws of nature and of nature's God, and it never has a day when it forgets that. Do you see how rare that is? Is there anything else except a certain college, which, by the way, is 176 years old now, but has at some points in its career forgotten them? But it doesn't matter if you forget them, by the way, because if they're original, they're there. Now, apart from breaking your ankle and getting awards, another thing that happens in your life is your students start telling you what to do. So Ryan has told me what to say tonight, and I'll say it quickly and be done. I have 7 students that I've had in class who've been Supreme Court clerks. One of them is the regulatory czar. I've known Vice President Pence for almost as long as they've been alive. But it's still true, if I get on the White House rota that I'm going to come see him or anybody else in the White House, they all call me and tell me what to say. I really like that. Ryan asked me to say, what would a statesman do today? The purpose of the Claremont Institute. I can answer that pretty briefly. First of all, it's a prudential point, right? Here we study Winston Churchill and Abraham Lincoln, than whom never has there been any better. And Churchill is a particular favorite of mine. And he leaves this rich record that you can follow everything he did, day by day, for a long life. The man wrote 50 books. He was brave on the battlefield. You just never anybody like him. On the other hand, one of the things he had to teach is what the right thing to do depends in part on the circumstances. And so the first thing a statesman would do was look at that. What are the circumstances? The circumstances are unique, I think, in American history. They're proceeding with the intensity of the 1850s, or of the conflict between the Loyalists and the Revolutionaries in the Revolutionary War, except in one way it's worse now, because today the best established forces in America are enemies of America. They wish to undo it. And it's a problem because they know America so very well, right? Like have you noticed in the last 3 or 4 years, there's a newfound interest in the Constitution. And what they want to do is use it to destroy it. And that's everywhere. This thing about the courts and about packing the courts, that's not about getting their way in a national public policy. It is about that, but that's a secondary consideration. The primary consideration is this. One of the glories and indispensable glories of the rule of law is that the law applies the same to the strong and the weak. And that way, the courts have to be independent. Not to lose their job. By the way, they have to be people who've cultivated their intellects and characters in the way that Amy Barrett has cultivated hers. And that means that you go before her, and you're a conservative or a liberal, and she will be looking at the law and the evidence about what you did, and not about whether you're friends of the king or Barack Obama or Donald Trump. That is being shaken. Now, this pandemic, once you think that way for a minute, this pandemic is not odd or strange. This pandemic is wicked, and it threatens everything. I'll just tell you a couple of stories about what it's like to run a college in this pandemic. You know, the college I run is very weird. It's about 2,100 people working very intensely together, doing very great things, and talking every month to millions. Now, the money doesn't exist there in Hillsdale to run the college. We get about 7% of our money from our students, which places me in the wonderful position to tell them, I don't need you. Be good or I'll throw you out of here. And they laugh when you say that, right? And also they know it's meant. So why do resources pour into that? Because I confess, we spend a god-awful amount of money on them, right? Why would people want to do that? Why would the people outside? Well, the answer is they do it for love. Because the activity of the college is an activity of knowledge that keeps alive the highest things that are. And you can come and visit, and you can see it happens there all the time. Also, the kids will be good. If they won't be good, we'll kill them. But we don't have to, In 175 years, Civil War, Depression, World Wars, Hillsdale College has never been closed by the government until March of this year for 2 months. And everybody says, well, they're young, they can make it up, right? Well, that's exactly the same temper that doesn't count the cost of the people who commit suicide because they lose their businesses. A lot of you have businesses, right? We here, Claremont people, right? We built this stupid thing. We sweated over it. My wife, the most important colleague I have, she lived the Claremont Institute. For the 20 years I worked there, I was president for 15. She lives Hillsdale College today, right? And she's here tonight. You see, what if that's just disrupted of a sudden? There's harm in that, deep harm in that, and we don't count the harm. There's only the virus. At Hillsdale, so first of all, because I, happen to work in a college and like to do that, and I know the students, right? The vice president, I was on a task force at 14 college presidents with him, and he asked me a lot of questions, and I gave a different answer than all the rest of them. The Stanford guy was there, and the Virginia guy was there, the Notre Dame guy was there. I was there because he knew I would. He said, do they want to come back? I said, Vice President, have you ever met any? Of course they want to come back. This is their life. This is the time when they have the youth and energy to build an intellect and a character. This is the time before their careers have started. This is the time when they can become human fully. And they long for that. They love it. And not because it's a party. Half the time it's a drudgery. The other half, it is a party. You see? I said, you've got kids, He said, I do. And he said, so you're thinking about bringing them back? And I said, I am not. He said, you're not thinking about it? And I said, no, August 23rd. That's when they're coming back. Anybody tries to stop me, I'm going to sue them. We got some of the best lawyers in the country, names you would recognize. We got 3 of the best epidemiologists. Victor helped us meet 2 of them, Atlas and Bhattacharya, and then Daniel Halpern from North Carolina. And we had affidavits, and we were ready to go to war. Because why? Because it's my job to have college. And I just told you, I don't need their money. Well, 7%, that's something. But I could cut my costs a lot more than 7% if I got rid of them. So we're going to do it, right? And I will tell you, we scheduled it for July 18th, middle of the summer. I couldn't imagine that there would be an effort to stop us. But then you can see these shutdowns are still going on. And in that conference call with the vice president, I said, Dr. Birx, Deborah Birx, I said, is this disease dangerous to the young? This is in May. She said, no. She didn't give a doctoral thesis. She said, no. I said, well, there's your answer, right? We got some old people and some sick people. We'll keep them away. I mean, by the way, unless they want to not be away, which most of them don't, I can tell you. But if it's not going to hurt the kids, then you can have college. Well, it's July 18th, and we're going to have this college, and the limit on the size of a group is 100. So we get our legal papers ready, and we get our affidavits ready, and we notice that the governor, the wicked witch of the Midwest is Gretchen. I guess Newsom is the wicked warlock of the West. She's still, she passed a rule that it's legal to buy a garden hoe, but it's not legal to buy seeds. And so if you go in Walmart, the seed part's roped off. Who thought of that? There's only about 15 of them that were doing this up there in the governor's office, running the country by fiat. So we became concerned, because commencement's a big deal. Usually it's about 4,500 people. This year we figured we'd have 2,800. We'd limit the guest list, to be within reason. And the limit in Michigan at that time was 100. So my view was, okay, we'll have 28 groups of 100. And we told her, 5 weeks before commencement, we said, we're going to do this thing. You keep saying that the limits on size do not apply to First Amendment activities. Commencement would be such a thing. And remember what I said about the judges? If we have our rights, each of us has it. If some of us don't, none of us does. So they replied, well, we can't really predict what the rules will be in 5 weeks from today. So in other words, that's what I will confess I got a little cranky about that. She expected me to cancel it because she might later object. Now that's ugly. And so we didn't. And then in a subsequent conversation with the general counsel, I confess I've got one. I've got the best in the world. It's not a very good kind of thing, but he's awesome. They were surprised that we hadn't just canceled it. They hadn't given us a reason, but they thought that they resisted would be sufficient. Think what kind of government it is that thinks that way. Think what it thinks of us. So we went ahead, right? And sure enough, 2 days before, I invited 2,800 people to the campus. We got 95% of the senior class back. It was joyous, by the way. It was what it should have been. We learned in Aristotle that the completion of a thing is the time when the thing reaches its fullness. And everybody's college education, if the college is any good, which is rare these days, but if it is good, that's important, right? And so it was grand. But I invited the people and I said, get ready. You may have to go home disappointed. And every morning from Wednesday until Sunday morning, there was an announcement, are we going to get to go forward one more day? And I didn't know the state cops weren't going to show up with all of us gathered in the sports stadium. She did call, the Deputy Attorney General called the local prosecutor, who turns out to be a buddy of ours. He gave the most eloquent athletic banquet speech I've ever heard. He coaches soccer at the Hillsdale Academy, our school. And here's his whole speech. I'll tell you every word of it, he says. I coach boys. Boys like wood. Boys like to cut it, they like to hit things with it, and they like to burn it. That's boys. And then he sat down. That is boys, isn't it? And so I just love that guy, right? And so we went to him and said, here's our plan. Look at the governor's laws. You're an officer of the court, by the way. You can't write anything you don't believe. But is this legal? And he gave us a letter that said, in his opinion, it was legal, which if they'd prosecuted us would have been a powerful instrument. Thank him. But they called him on Thursday. People are starting to come on Wednesday. And he says, they're breaking the law. Let's go get them. And he said, well, are they now? They've put all these protections in place. And I'm telling you, I don't even believe in them. Jay Bhattacharya, a great man, told me 10 days ago in Omaha, Nebraska, that there are 50,000 college students at that time had it, and 2 of them had been hospitalized, and both of them got out the next day. So we're going to prevent college kids from getting this? That's, it's going everywhere, right? And it'll be good if they get it, because they won't spread it then. It'll stop the virus when it gets around them. That's the most obvious thing in the world, but never mind. I'm doing the protections. The conspiracy at Hillsdale, because we're doing some now, although we're pretty open. And the conspiracy or the undercurrent explanation is, well, we have to do this so Dr. Arnn doesn't get arrested. Although they would kind of like it if I got arrested, because I'd be a hero. He said, they got the protections. He said, never mind, it's over the limit. He said, but you said this thing about the First Amendment. And the Deputy Attorney General of Michigan replied, but this is not a spontaneous event. Do you see what that means? I told that to Bill Barr not long ago. He said, I never thought I'd hear that one, and I thought I'd heard everything. You can only exercise your rights under the First Amendment if you do not intend to do it in advance. Then he pulled out the kicker. He said, these people are very sophisticated, and I think they're determined, and I've seen their legal papers. You could lose here. And directly in response, the Deputy Attorney General of Michigan said, I see, you're probably right, we shouldn't do anything. You know what that makes them? Just bullies. I was prepared to go ahead because I believe I had the right, and we needed it. They're prepared to surrender because they're just looking for victory. And of course, that means they're laying for us now, and will be as long as they're around and we're around. And we're going to be around longer than they are. Now, my point is, there's a microcosm of the situation. There's no safety. So we should act like that, huh? What did our fathers and our mothers do in a situation like that? We learned 2 things from Harry Jaffa. They're actually the grand strategy of the Claremont Institute. 2 things are necessary to live free and well. The first is there must be a politics of freedom. Abraham Lincoln, Winston Churchill, they represented that, right? And although they were fierce and warlike and summoned resources to defend liberty and destroy its enemies beyond what anybody did in their countries to this day, on the other hand, they bowed to the people. It was the rule of law. The great thing, the great innovation of the Republican Party was that although it was an abolitionist party, it would not violate the Constitution. And that's how the idea was come up with, and I can tell you, it was come up with by 2 people who worked at Hillsdale College and then became the governor and lieutenant governor of Michigan in the Civil War. And that is, we won't mess with it in the states. It wouldn't be legal. We'll stop it from growing anywhere else. And then slavery, Lincoln would later say, would be placed in the course of ultimate extinction. That's the politics of freedom. We have to find a way to fix this that restores the rule of law. What else do we learn from them? We have to speak in the language of the final cause of the American Union, the Declaration of Independence. We have to follow the forms of the formal cause of the United States, the Constitution. We have to find constitutional ways to upend this ugly bureaucratic state. We have to improve our rhetoric, and our rhetoric must be based on populism. Because what populism just means is consent of the governed. If you adopt the principle that no one may apply force upon anyone else except with their consent, that's populism. We have to speak to the people as a people. Now, why? First of all, this corruption that's come into our country, it comes from Europe and it filters down from the great universities. And what it's done is it's made us all lusters after power. Do you watch those journalists? I mean, by the way, does anybody want to join the committee to horsewhip Chris Wallace? On Fox News introducing this debate, that jackass was talking. And they were asking him questions. Oh, what's it like if you're the moderator in this hour before the debate? Well, you're nervous, but you've done your work, and so you're ready to go, right? He's like some sports star about to play in the World Series. And he said to Donald Trump and Joe Biden, if I can obey the rules, why cannot you? And the correct answer to that is, who the hell are you? Right? One of them was elected by the American people to be president of the United States. The other was nominated by the largest party in the country to run for president of the United States. They have standing from the people. Bill Barr gave a talk for Hillsdale College in Virginia. Can't do anything in D.C. right now. Hillsdale College is operating in exile. South Dakota, Omaha, Virginia, some parts. And you know what his talk said? It was beautiful, by the way. Nobody here, and I'm talking to some of the people who could do this, the best of people alive, could say any better what he said. And what he said was, the reason there is one authority in the Justice Department is that the authority comes from the people through the president to the Justice Department. Do you know what the headline in the Washington Post said the next day? And they were there. They taped the speech. Barr, absolute power. Now, that's a lie. Because a lot of things they do at the Washington Post I could ascribe to stupidity, but they're not that stupid. It's just a lie. One of my kids, Mr. Philbert Wegman, works for Real Clear Politics, and he goes to the president's briefings at the White House, and the president recognizes him to ask questions. You can see him sometimes. He lives in constant complaint from other journalists that he's allowed in there. But you know, the White House press room is in the White House, and that belongs to the people of the United States. And they appoint somebody to live in that house and run that house. And they have forgotten that point. The desire for power infects everything in the land. It's dangerous. So, to the people who are at risk, we have to point out that danger. Apart from the politics of freedom, Professor Jaffe wrote an essay, one of his complicated titles, on the necessity of a scholarship of the politics of freedom. People have to study and think and read deeply and well. I mean, Victor Hansen, right? What's his career like? He's delved into all that, right? He knows it down to the ground. He knows it in the original languages, if they're classical languages. And so that's a treasure, right? And it takes a lifetime to produce that. We should be producing that wherever we can. That is my specific business. Just as it is the specific business of the Claremont Institute. Because you see, the Claremont Institute is nimble in a way that a college cannot be. Well, mine's pretty good, but it's because we're tyrants. It can just meet people who are willing, and build a relationship and teach them over time. And so the preserves of the scholarship of the politics of freedom are in a few places, and this is one. I'll close by telling you why not to despair. These two things that Professor Jaffa taught us to long for, that we built the Claremont Institute for, the politics of freedom and a scholarship of the politics of freedom, I saw them with my own eyes on Constitution Day. There was a panel, I was the moderator of it, appointed by the White House, a bunch of people to talk about how we should teach American history. In other words, revive the scholarship of the politics of freedom. And then after that, Donald Trump and Mike Pence came in, and they gave as good a speech as I have ever heard about the politics of freedom. He was standing, we were all sitting in front of the original copy of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States in the National Archives. And I was 15 feet from the man, and I watched him. And I think he owned every word of that speech. And I know some of his speechwriters, they say he did. So you see, if those things can rise up right now, even if it looks hopeless that they can be reelected, which I don't think, even if it looks like they're going to be crushed, even if it looks like, which is surely the truth, that just about every established authority is against them. I close by asking, what is that to us? Because the established authorities cannot be a pittance or a fraction compared to the beauty of the truth and of freedom. And our forefathers fought that against overwhelming odds, and we should count a privilege to get to do that again today. Thank you.
I think we can all agree that COVID-19 finally met its match in Dr. Arnn. So here we are at last. We happy few, we conservative band of brothers in this small little atoll in the middle of this liberal city, in the middle of a liberal metropolis, in the middle of a very blue state. And we tend to get depressed, partly I started the night with a depressing talk, because we feel that we're living in an alternate reality. We go to Google and we search something and we think something's wrong with the order of the searches. The least important items come up first, and we start to see this progressive bias even in the way that we access knowledge. A friend said to me, when you pick up a classics text now, have you noticed something? I said, yeah, what is it? He said, anything that's written after 1980 to 85, 1990, that people don't know Greek and Latin anymore. And I said, that's right. They don't. There's mistakes in the text. They don't even use the original languages. If you want relief and you turn on the NBA, you see all these people who are courting this dirty money from China lecturing us on how terrible the system is that enriched them. If I hear one more lecture from LeBron James, I'm going to go nuts. You turn to the NFL and you say, well, that's just the NBA, and you see that all the people who are kneeling are patriotic and the few that are standing are unpatriotic during the national anthem. And you say, I can't take this, I'll go watch a movie. And you see that all of the talent of old Hollywood has been reduced to these scripted either comic book movies or these race class and gender psychodramas. And it's like a panopticon. We're surrounded, everything we do in 360-degree fashion, 24/7, is holistic. It's like the French Revolution rather than the American Revolution. They want to change not the political system, but they want to change everything, the names of things, the titles of things, the way you think, the way you dress, the way you talk to yourself. I went to my office one day at the Hoover Tower and I looked down and I thought something was strange because they were removing the sign. I forgot about it. I went home. I came back and it was no longer Father Sarah Plaza. I thought, this is strange. I've been here for 15 years, and I thought I was Winston Smith in 1984, and somebody had taken the name and put it down the memory hole. Remember that? 1984? It just disappeared, and there was no discussion of it. All of a sudden, somebody decided that Father Sarah, this heroic missionary that helped found the culture of California, had disappeared. And that's what's happening in our society. And when you put all of this together, you think, wow, we're crazy because we're in the minority. And I want to tell you tonight as you leave that we're in the majority and we're sane, and the crazy people are telling us that they're sane, and they're not really in control. They're not in control because they can't really win the will of the people. They have to depend on the courts or the media or the foundations or the universities or Hollywood or the entertainment or corrupting the professional sports, because they can't make an argument that appeals to the majority of people. It doesn't mean they're not dangerous. It doesn't mean that historically minorities have not seized power. It just tells us that we are not crazy. And they are. And I'll finish with this great quote, if you remember, from Virgil's Aeneid. It's right in the middle of the worst moments of fighting. Aeneas says a great line to his people. I think it applies to all of us tonight. And says, there's going to come a day in your life, it will bring you delight to have memory of this day. And I think that for all the terrible things that happened in 2020, nobody gave up. We fought the virus, we fought the lockdown, we fought the recession, we fought the violence in the street. And I think someday, because we're going to prevail, we're going to look back and say it's going to bring us great memory to remember 2020, not to be ashamed of it, but remember that they did their best, they did their worst, and we did our best, and we won. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm going to try to get my voice down to that same bass level that Spencer was talking at, but it's very, very difficult to be so profound as in that lovely prayer. But welcome everyone to this annual dinner of the Claremont Institute, or as we like to call it, this illegal assembly. This is, I'm not sure it's illegal, but then I'm not really sure it's legal either, because we were going to be holding it outside, of course, which is officially sanctioned, and instead we're inside. And I believe that Governor Newsom may show up at any moment to interrupt this proceeding. But I should say we owe a great measure of thanks to Ryan Williams, our president, because over the course of the summer he held 3 fellowship programs here in Orange County, or almost all of them in Orange County, 2 in Orange County, I think 1 in San Diego County, in person. Most think tanks anywhere in the country, most colleges and universities anywhere in the country have been in virtual mode for many months now. The only think tank I know of that has been able to persevere and to gather together actual human beings, not virtual ones, but actual human beings in fellowship and in intellectual conversation has been Ryan Williams and the Claremont Institute, the Publius program. Let's give him a hand, absolutely. He's been very successful at defying, or at least evading, Governor Newsom's noisome regulations, and for that we're very grateful, Ryan. Now, I know that, speaking of his regulations, that many of you are probably planning your Thanksgiving already, and I have the latest regulations from the governor right here. So if you would, and I'm unfortunately not making these up, the governor, of course, has decreed, and these are not literally or even figuratively laws, of course. These are executive decrees of the governor on behalf of the Public Health Department in his own government. As you know, gatherings that include more than 3 households are prohibited. So if you have more than 3 children, who have their own households. You can only invite 2 of them over. And all gatherings, and let me repeat that, all gatherings must be held outside in November, late November. You know, if you lived in Hillsdale, Michigan, there will be snow on the ground in late November. But the governor, in his mercy, has hedged that commandment. He says that attendees may go inside to use the restroom. But I'm not finished. To use the restroom as long as the restrooms are frequently sanitized. So, you know, this will give somebody something to do, at least between courses. And as you know, seating, of course, must be 6 feet apart in all directions, front to back and side to side. And therefore, if you're already dead and buried, you have a great advantage because you're 6 feet, there's 6 feet of earth between you and the next person. And the only way to satisfy these regulations, it seems to be, is something very much like that. And of course, people at these gatherings may remove their face coverings briefly to eat or drink and put their face covering back on as soon as they are done with the activity. The activity. Happy Thanksgiving activity, everybody. I mean, it's like we're animals who are, you know, the activity is just eating. Now, you know Thanksgiving dinner can't last more than 2 hours. So plan accordingly. The activity, you know, is strictly limited because the longer the duration, the governor says, the risk of transmission increases. And above all, and this is the most important thing, no singing, chanting, shouting, or physical exertion because these significantly increase the risk of COVID. Now, I don't know about you, but I haven't really gone to a Thanksgiving dinner where there's chanting, but maybe I could give that up. But there's no singing, no touch football, no physical activity of any kind. And as you know, in California, which used to be a free state, the churches everywhere in the state are constrained to 25% capacity and no singing. At least no singing louder than, and this is the way the standard reads, a soft conversation. And the singers have to have their mask on while they're singing. Whatever happened to make a joyful noise unto the Lord? I mean, if our governor and his allies in Hollywood had their way, we wouldn't be talking about Jesus Christ Superstar, we'd be talking about Jesus Christ Super Spreader. Now, I know that many of you probably saw the election debate the other night, the second debate. How many did see it? Yeah, so almost everyone. I don't know how you thought they did. I thought Trump did very well at this. He reminded me of a remark that Harold Nicholson directed to Winston Churchill. And since we have a great Churchill expert here, I feel the need to quote at least one Churchill. Actually, it's not by Churchill, but about Churchill. Nicholson said of Churchill after the question period, he was, quote, cherubic, pink, solid, and vociferous. And that seems to be a pretty good description of Trump in the debate. Maybe not so cherubic, but, you know, pink, solid, and vociferous, yes. I don't know what you thought of Biden, but it's pretty clear from the emails and so forth that we've seen recently that if his son is the hunter, Joe Biden is the gatherer. And that there seems to be some kind of cooperation going on there. I'm not sure. In my neighborhood, at least, there are no lawn signs for Donald Trump. There are many, many signs, however, for Joe Biden. And this is a mystery to me in many ways, but then I realized Halloween is almost here. And what is scarier than a Biden for president sign on your lawn? I mean, young kids are going to be absolutely frightened as they, if it's allowed, if they're allowed to approach your house. I mean, they are wearing masks, so I don't know. Well, the occasion tonight is, of course, in honor of Larry Arnn and in honor of the Claremont Institute, which I came to know 40 years ago when I arrived in Claremont for the first time as a Publius Fellow, one of the first Publius Fellows. Larry Arnn was not there. He was in England working with Martin Gilbert on the Churchill biography, and luckily meeting his future wife, Penny Arnn. That's what she calls herself now, Penny Arnn. And I was left to the tender mercies of everyone else in Claremont, but it was a formative experience and a wonderful experience, which was much deepened and improved when I moved out here and Larry returned from England triumphant with his wife, and we got to know each other. And it turns out we had a lot in common. We loved Churchill, we loved political philosophy, we supported Ronald Reagan, you remember him, of course. But perhaps the one thing that you don't know about is that Larry and I were both, and are both, country boys. Or, as George Jones would say, country boys. Country. We loved George Jones, Merle Haggard, old-fashioned country music, and we went many times, several times at least, to concerts, some of which we actually remember. And we were so square in a way that we would gather to watch Dallas weekly, the television show, I mean, and Penny would cook these fantastic three-course meals for us to watch Dallas. I mean, she is a remarkable chef and a truly remarkable person and friend. Larry was the second president of the Claremont Institute, as you may know, but the first one who could read a balance sheet. And this was very good, it turns out, for us. But he, and under his presidency, which lasted until 2000, I guess, about 20 years ago, a lot of great work was accomplished here. Among other things, Claremont was one of the leading forces in the drive to enact Prop 209 and outlaw discrimination by race and ethnicity and so forth in the California Constitution, a measure which is up for repeal in Proposition 16 this very year. And if the repeal passes, California will be in a position to once again legally, at least by its own lights, discriminate on the basis of race and ethnicity in college admissions, in contracting, government contracting, and in other respects. So we made a lot of progress, but that progress is up for grabs now. Much in this election year is up for grabs about America and about life in California. But just before he left for Hillsdale 20 years ago, my friend Larry made an epic decision, which was to authorize the publication of the Claremont Review of Books. It was Larry who basically made the Claremont Review of Books happen. And that is a decision. We are now celebrating the completion of our 20th anniversary. We're now in the beginning of the 21st volume of the Claremont Review of Books. It wouldn't have happened without the far-seeing, risk-taking attitude of Larry Arnn. He, of course, left the financing of it to his successor. But at Hillsdale, as you'll hear in greater detail from Ryan when he makes Larry's formal introduction, Larry has had a fantastic record, including most recently the construction of a magnificent chapel, Christ Chapel, in which a joyful noise may be made to the Lord, I'm sure. Larry Arnn is our speaker tonight. He is the only speaker in Claremont history to be asked to speak twice in a row on Friday and on Saturday and Sunday, and we certainly hope it will be better than last night. So thank you very much.